Hey there, and welcome back to Nostalgia Academy. This is the channel where we dive into the stories behind some of the most influential and underappreciated bands in rock history. Today we're exploring the legacy of a band that might not be a household name. In fact, I am quite sure they're not a household name, and I'll be very surprised if many of you have ever heard them, and I can't wait to find out. But their impact on the alternative and indie rock scenes of the 80s, it was pretty good, and they lasted until early 90s perhaps. But we're talking about the Reivers from Austin, Texas. Now, Austin, Texas has been a hotbed of musical activity forever, and they just happened to come out at one of those times where there was a bunch of them. I know what Spoon comes out of there now. I don't keep up a whole lot, but we're going to look into their history, then look into their discography a little bit and go over each record and see what we liked, what I didn't like. Maybe talk about their impact a little bit, and then what I want to do is give a personal story about each of these bands, and most of them I've seen live, and the Reivers are no different. I've seen them twice in concert. So let's go with the Reivers. Now, the Reivers were originally known as Zeitgeist. They were forced to change their name because a choral group in Minneapolis, I think, had the name before they did, so they changed it to the Reivers, and that's when I caught wind of them. And I really can't remember how I caught wind of them. I'm guessing I probably read about them in Rolling Stone magazine or something like that. Hear something about a hot new band, and I'd immediately go buy a cassette of theirs. I worked at a grocery store, and every other week when I'd get my paycheck, I'd immediately go to the music store and buy a couple of albums, whether I even knew what they were about or not. I discovered a lot of great music that way, but yeah, the Reivers are one of the ones that I really, really like, but I hardly ever go back and listen to them again. So let's get into that. The original lineup consisted of John Crossland on guitar and vocals, Kim Longacre on guitar and vocals, Cindy Toth on bass, and Garrett Williams on drums. Crossland, who had been involved in the Austin music scene for a while and still is, he was the primary songwriter and brought a distinctive blend of power pop and some introspective lyrics that were more poetic probably than I thought they were at the time. They quickly gained a following in Austin, known for their energetic live shows and the chemistry between Crossland and Longacre, whose vocal harmonies became basically their signature element of their entire sound. In 1985, still known as Zeitgeist at this point, they released their debut album, Translate Slowly. The album was immediate critical success, drawing attention for its melodic hooks, intricate guitar work, and the interplay between Crossland and Longacre's vocals. Tracks like R.E.M and Freight Train Rain showcased the band's ability to craft songs that were both catchy and emotionally resonant. Translate Slowly was praised by critics for its fresh take on the jangle pop sound that was popular in the mid-'80s, and we're talking about bands like the DBs and R.E.M. They kind of came up at that same time. They really didn't set themselves apart. I think that was probably part of the problem with them, is they kind of blended in with a whole lot of other bands like Dump Truck at the time, but I just loved them. Although it didn't achieve mainstream commercial success, the album Translate Slowly, the album quickly became a favorite among fans of indie and alternative rock. The success of Translate Slowly helped the Reivers build a strong following, not just in Austin, but across the country. They began to tour more extensively, sharing stages with some of the biggest names in alternative rock at the time, like R.E.M. Despite the legal issues surrounding their original name, the band's momentum continued to grow, and they were soon signed to Capitol Records. In 1987, the Reivers released their second album, Saturday. This was where I jumped in. This is their first album I had, and I love it still. This was their first under Capitol Records. With this album, the band refined their sound, creating a record that was more polished and radio-friendly without sacrificing the emotional core that had defined their earlier work. Saturday features some of the band's most enduring songs, including In Your Eyes and Wait for Time. Now, looking back at Saturday, that's one that from top to bottom, I think it's a fantastic record. Me and the guitarist I was working with at the time in our band, we did a cover of In Your Eyes. We also did a cover of Blue Eyes Crying in the Rain, which they did, which was a cover of a Willie Nelson song, so go figure. In Your Eyes is one of the Reivers' most beloved tracks. It's one of the most known. It was the one that was played on MTV for a little bit. And the song could blend jangly guitars with Crossland and Longacre's harmonized vocals, creating a sound that perfectly complements the lyrics, which it does, and explores the themes of love, doubt, passage of time, etc. It's a song that captures the bittersweetness of growing up and moving on, the recurring theme in the Reivers' music. Another standout track on Saturday is Wait for Time. Wait for Time is a killer song. You should really look that one up. It exemplifies the Reivers' knack for creating music that's both introspective and instantly accessible. The album as a whole was well received by critics, who praised the band's growth and the more refined production. However, despite the positive reviews and strong fan support, Saturday struggled to break into the mainstream, a common theme in the band's career and a common theme in the career of many bands at that time. Now, Saturday was produced by Don Dixon. And if you know anything about Don Dixon, at that time, it was very cavernous, lots of reverb on the drums and such, a very in-your-face drum sound. It was a very different sound from Translate Slowly, the first record. But I loved it, and I still love it today. By 1989, the Reivers were ready to release their third album called End of the Day. This album marked a turning point for the band as they began to experiment with a slightly darker, more complex sound. The songwriting on End of the Day is some of the band's most mature, dealing with themes of loss, regret, and the challenges of adulthood. End of the Day has probably one of my favorite Reivers songs. It's called Star Telegram, and it's one that I don't know if anyone ever has heard outside of hardcore fans. It was a fan favorite when I saw them in concert twice, and it's one of those that I spin it up at least once a year. It's a good song. They also performed Almost Home on the album End of the Day, which you will find on Hootie and the Blowfish covers album called Scattered, Smothered, and Covered. In fact, Hootie and the Blowfish liked the Reivers so much, and I know this because I used to know them, that they did R.E.M and Almost Home. So yeah, they were really big fans. In fact, I got to know Hootie and the Blowfish a little bit because they ended up seeing our band in Columbia at one time, and we did the Blue Eyes cover, and he came up to us and said, "Hey, it's good to hear somebody do some Reivers." I'm like, well, it's actually a Willie Nelson song, but he knew that, I'm sure. I hope so. Critically, End of the Day was another success for the Reivers. The album was praised for its lyrical depth and the band's willingness to evolve their sound. However, the music industry was changing rapidly in the late 80s, and the Reivers found themselves struggling to gain the kind of commercial success that could sustain their career in the long term. Despite the challenges, the band continued to tour and write new music, determined to stay true to their artistic vision. As the 80s came to a close, the Reivers faced increasing pressure from the record label to produce a hit. That's all too common, right? The band's refusal to compromise on their sound and commitment to creating music that was true to their vision meant that they often found themselves at odds with the industry. Despite these challenges, the Reivers remained a beloved band among their fans who appreciated their integrity and the emotional honesty of their music. In 1991, the Reivers released what would be, at the time, their final studio album, Pop Beloved. By this time, the band had fully embraced a more polished, pop-oriented sound while retaining the lyrical depth and emotional resonance that had defined their earlier work. Pop Beloved features some pretty good songs. Breathin' Easy is really good. Over and Over is pretty good. My guitarist at the time liked Dragonfly. I don't know why, but it's one he liked. But Breathin' Easy is a perfect example of the Reivers' ability to craft songs that are catchy and meaningful. It was a different album, I'll just say that. The production of it, I think John Crosland did it himself, and it was different. It was interesting. Despite its strong songwriting and polished production, it struggled to gain traction in the shifting musical landscape of the early 90s. We all remember that. Everything was changing. With the rise of grunge and alternative rock bands like Nirvana and Pearl Jam, meant that the Reivers' brand of music, introspective pop, was increasingly kind of out of step with mainstream tastes. However, the album remains a favorite among fans. After the release of Pop Beloved, the Reivers continued to tour and promote the album, but the pressures of the music industry and the changing landscape proved too much. By 1992, the band decided to call it quits, playing a final series of shows before disbanding. It was a rotten end, I'll tell you, for a band that was really, really good. Some folks said that, at the time they were ahead of their time. I don't think they were. They were just a product of their time. At the end of the day, and that's not meant to be a pun, the Reivers were a band that stayed true to their artistic vision, creating music that continues to resonate with those who appreciate the beauty of a well-crafted song. And that's true. Their songs were really, you could tell a lot of time was put in development there. I like them a lot. I still do. I'm gonna go listen to them right after I'm done here. In the 2000s, the Reivers reunited for a series of shows. I didn't get to go see any of them. I think they were all in Austin, but I would have loved to. They also released, I forget what year it was, but they released a final album called Second Story, and I listened to it twice, and it sounds like a band that sounds like the Reivers. It's okay. It's magnificently pretty good. Now, what was their impact, the Reivers' impact on the rock and roll scene? I would say almost none, which is not a bad thing. I mean, if you have a fan base that's passionate about you, and during the time that you're making your art, that should be damn near enough to be enough for you. They weren't ever going to change their sound. I don't know if they could possibly change their sound like R.E.M did, or U2, where they changed their sound to become more radio friendly. I just didn't see that ever happening with them. And there's a lot of bands like that. Scruffy the Cat was kind of the same way. A lot of bands that were really, really good in a very small period of time. And I appreciate that. Now, personally, I got to see them twice. Once I got to see them at Green Streets in Columbia, South Carolina, and the place was packed out. This was on the End of the Day tour. We found out they were playing in Jacksonville, Florida at the legendary Einstein A-Go-Go's 2 nights later, I think. So me and my guitar buddy jumped in our vehicle at the time, drove down to Jacksonville, picked up a girl that we knew, and went to see them in Jacksonville, Florida. And they were just as good, just as packed out. And the cool thing was, because Einstein A-Go-Go's is kind of was a rock club / record store. There was a record store right next to it. We actually got to meet Cindy Toth, who was the bass player for the Reivers, who was just in there looking at records. And I told her, like, we thought they were the best band on the planet, and she thought that was kind of cute. Anyways, to close this out, this discussion on the Reivers, do you even remember the Reivers? Do you have any favorite Reivers songs? Did you ever go see them in concert? They were really powerful in concert. I remember they did the Charlie Brown theme at one of the shows, and I'm a big Charlie Brown fan, so I loved that. Yeah, they were fun. They were playful, fiery on stage. I mean, a lot bigger than you would think from listening to the records. But anyways, let me know in the comments below if you remember them, if you have a favorite song of theirs. Were they overrated? Underrated? I don't know. Anyways, take care, and I'll talk to you on the next one.